Hello everyone, this is Ashvejlou, and welcome to Ashvejlou Art's first ever video tutorial in our Ashvejlou sketch series. I will be going over various time-lapse videos and giving brief overviews of just how my artistic process works. So now some of this is going to include art basics and fundamentals, sketching your first ash frames, layout and composition, lighting and depth, and of course lastly, finalizing your product. You can visit my website, which is listed right at the bottom of the screen, for more art, fantasy, and exciting content. If you love the art, then please like and subscribe. Without any further delay, as I'm sure you're tired of me talking, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so what we did here is I just fired it up. I had a general picture of myself here, and I'm going to go through and actually trace. And now I know tracing is, it's a little bit of a conundrum. A lot of people on the internet say that tracing's cheating or so on and so forth, but in a lot of cases I would actually agree with them. Now in this case, I'm doing an actual portrait. I need it to look exactly like, for instance, me or whoever else that you're going to be doing this portrait of. And so in order to get those proportions perfect, or at least as I start building those tones up towards the lighter areas, I go ahead and use the spray paint tool, which gives it those flecks, that gives it kind of the illusion of having real skin, for instance, using the highlights and the zones like that. I also work on the hair. I actually have my own custom hairbrush that I'll be releasing with this video, which I used on this painting. So in this, it helps when you start building your lower layers and then building up to your highlights. As you can see here, I'm just slowly building the layers one on top of the other, going darker and then lighter and lighter and lighter until you finally hit your highlights. Now your highlights, you want them small. You have to figure out where your light's coming from. In this sense, we have a light source already, so we don't need to do too much work on that. We can essentially just kind of glance at our reference photo and fill in the light source there. Now, as we're working on a normal piece, for instance, a piece that wouldn't be a portrait or something like that, we would want to have to pick our light source and then direct from there. So now what I've done is I've just sketched in a basic shirt, really something simple that will fill it in. We're not looking to do that. We're going to replace that later with something better. So now I've picked up some sort of armor, threw a general reference on there, and we're going to block it out. Now I'm not looking for an exact replica of that, obviously. I'm just looking for a general idea of what I'm going to sketch. Now from here, it's all just general creative process. Building the fur, whatever kind of extra accents that you're going to be adding to it. And fur works pretty much the exact same way as I did the hair, building from the darker layers, moving up. Those light areas right on the tips, that really gives it that sense that there's some depth there, and then moving down into your darker darks. Now what I don't like doing is I don't like using complete black. Whenever you use black, I feel like it gets a little too dark. So if you notice, I'll use different variations of purple, blue, or in this case even greens and yellows as my dark. In order to do that, it kind of adds the general color of your skin tone into what you're working with as far as your armor, your fur, your skin. It all needs to be complementary within a couple level of color. Now of course, if you're looking to do a painting that gives you a different kind of ominous feeling perhaps, then you can change colors, even adding yellows or greens with purples, those contradictory colors, in order to give it kind of a surreal look. But for this one right here, we're just working basic. We're trying to have this kind of yellowy brown kind of color, kind of give the idea that it might be rusted or it might be a little beat up. It's seen some battle. So what we're doing here is we're just going to continue to do the same thing we did, building from our dark layers up, adding some texturing, and it's really nothing in particular. Most of our texturing is done just blotches and giving it the illusion that there's depth there. So, and you'll notice a lot of the edges where that light's coming from, I use the same light source that was located on my face and just putting it into the armor. So I'm trying to essentially simulate a light source that might not actually be there, since obviously I'm just making it up. Of course, the more detail you put into it, you have to be careful, because whenever you put detail into things, sometimes, like me in particular, I like to over detail things, and sometimes things just don't look as natural when they're over detailed. Sometimes making things really basic and giving them that just general sense will draw your eye towards, for instance, the center of our photo, which is the face, because you're going to want to put your most detail in the center point where your eye is going to be drawn. The rest of it is essentially, I mean, you have to put detail there, but you have to draw your eye to the most detailed point, or else it just looks cluttered. So if we look here as we're working on that, we put some face tattoos on there, just some fantasy stuff, and it's mainly just scribbles, but it looks cool and adds that kind of sense of fantasy, and adds that kind of the whole aura to the painting. And of course, one thing I am working in Procreate, and so it's nice, it's all touchscreen, so you're able to remove and add pretty simply. I'm working with an Apple pen, and which is great for using stuff as I'm doing now, with working with clouds and lighting. So now, what I did with the background is I used kind of a strange, almost yellowy color, which is an offshoot of the armor in the face, that kind of sub-level color. When I use that color, it's going to complement everything else. Adding the clouds with the white, which is the same white that I used on the face paint. And so doing that, it kind of adds the whole thing, and it puts your painting together and gives that sense of feeling. So now buildings, of course, I used the same green as I used for the base layer of my armor, because in my first sketches, I didn't go over the ash sketches here. But what I will end up doing is I will go in my next series, I'll show you how to do ash sketches, which are general keyframes, black and white keyframes, just really basic to get the idea what you want to draw. So in my mind, I've already planned on putting trees in here. So that's why I used a lot of the green base colors. For instance, the green and yellow are complementary. And so I use the green base color on the armor, a little bit in the sky, and that really, it's going to pull together once you start putting those deeper greens in. And as you see here, I'm just putting real basic details in here. This building, it's going to be a focal point, but it's not going to be the focal point. So we want to have enough detail to give it that sense of realism. I put in my little sketch lines there, so I get my windows the right area. A lot of it's just blotching and adjusting and smudging with the right brushes. So now, as we're going through and we're moving this and putting this whole thing together, we want to be conscientious of our light source and where it's at the same time, we can add some extra light sources in there, because as we see, that farther tower is a little bit brighter as the closer stuff gets a little darker, because whenever you have things in your foreground, they have to be darker. It gives that sense of depth. For instance, like we're adding these windows in, we're adding a little bit of light to them, which when you add the light to them and you make it darker on the outside, it gives the illusion of contrast. By doing that, we'll have a general idea, and it'll give you that more sense of depth as that it's closer. So now what we're going to do is here I'm adding just some more trees. We're just going to make it, we want this to be very treed, make it look almost elven, for instance. And so we want to kind of add the architecture into that natural world. And so what we do here is I'm actually pulling the trees with the same base green color and base yellow color that I used in the armor and the building. So once again, I'm tying in those same colors that we used in the other previous parts of this painting in order to make these trees. Everything is all based off that same set of greens and yellows. Of course, the face is different, but that's our focal point, so that's where we're wanting to draw all of the focus to. So, and then we just sketch in some miscellaneous vines, nothing crazy, no real detail to begin with. We're just going to slowly add some moss and some lighting and just a little bit of color to it. There's not a lot of detail there. Most of our detail is going to come in your eye filling it in, because you want whoever's looking at the painting to have their eye do most of the work and fill in that extra detail that you might be leaving out. So that's what I'll do, and that's now what I'm working with as I work down here with the larger trees. Most of this is all just going to be blotches of green and miscellaneous stamp and brush. You know, it's not going to be anything in particular or crazy, but it gives you the idea that there's trees and stuff there. So anyway, this is the general concept. This is how we made it. This is actually for a DeviantArt competition called Elf Myself. So go ahead and check that out. And yeah, I hope this helped. So thanks so much for watching, and if you liked it, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and you know, I'll keep you in the loop for the next ones coming up.